Good evening, I'm Ces Oreña-Drilon.
I'm Pauline Verzosa.
And I'm Shawn Yao.
The big stories tonight. As a word war refuses to let up between Filipino lawmakers and Chinese diplomats, the suggestion to replace China's ambassador is broached again as one way to improve relations between Manila and Beijing.
And the Interior Department doubles the bounty for information on gambling magnate Atong Ang, whose whereabouts remain unknown a month after he was ordered arrested.
And Senator Robin Hood Padilla is turning the tables on his critics just after he called today's Youth Week for not handling depression well.
Bago pa lang itong Chinese ambassador is very hostile. He's adding fuel to the fire. So I think kung mas maganda kung papalitan ng someone who is more diplomatic.
Balat sibuyas and agresibo siya sa will be best for the interest of the Chinese and Philippine relationship na siguro magkaroon ng bagong ambassador. It will help a lot.
The Chinese embassy is not letting Philippine senators have the last word, issuing another statement dripping with sarcasm. Senators are not backing down either, with two of them saying it's time for a new Chinese ambassador. Mobile journalist Merimon Reyes has tonight's big story.
So instead of dousing cold water to the fire, he's adding fuel to the fire. So I think kung mas maganda kung papalitan ng someone who is more diplomatic in dealing with the host country.
Senator J.V. Ejercito is not mincing words. He believes replacing Chinese ambassador to the Philippines, Jing Xuan, could help put out the fiery verbal exchange still happening between Filipino lawmakers and Chinese diplomats.
But what is happening is that bago pa lang itong Chinese ambassador, kung di nagkakami, wala pang 2 months. Hasn't been here for 2 months since he assumed. And it's very hostile. And it's not improving our relationship with China na kumbaga damage na nga because of the situation the West Philippine Sea right now.
Senator Rafi Tulfo couldn't agree more. He too has unflattering observations of the Chinese ambassador's ways and words.
Parang balat sibuyas and agresibo siya sa kanyang mga aksyon. Yung kanyang reaksyon sa mga developments, sa mga nangyayari dito. I think, maybe, wala naman akong recommendatory power o wala akong authority para sabihin palitan. Pero it will be best for the interest of the Chinese and Philippine relationship na siguro magkaroon ng bagong ambassador. It will help a lot.
The person who can actually move to replace the current Chinese ambassador is President Bongbong Marcos. Malacanang has tried time and again to insist diplomacy when it comes to the issue that has engaged several senators and Chinese diplomats for weeks now.
Well, si Presidente, at least he has been diplomatic about it, no? Na sabi niya, no need for that. Pero they have to be, they have to put in place that what they are doing. They have been disrespecting us, but they want respect, but they have to respect also Philippine officials.
But at this point, nobody's backing down. Recently, the Chinese embassy took note of this statement made by Senator Erwin Tulfo on January 26.
If you do not like how democracy works in this country, then you are free to leave the Philippines. Get the out. Layas.
In a statement, Chinese Embassy Manila spokesperson Ji Lingpen mentioned Senate President Tito Soto and took offense at Beijing diplomats being called rude. Ji went on, quote, "You also say we are disrespectful, yet some senators labeled China as bully, called the Chinese embassy a bad guest or a troll farm. Is that what you call respect?" He also denied Soto's remark that Beijing is silencing senators. For G, the reality is there are senators intimidating their embassy, even threatening to declare them persona non grata. That, the embassy spokesman says, is what silencing looks like. Soto's response was curt. When someone triggers you to react and you do not, it's annoying. I prefer to be annoying. G is not yet done and called out Senator Kiko Pangilinan next. Pangilinan had pointed to international law and the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations when the Chinese embassy rejected Senate Resolution 256. That document is a condemnation of Beijing's officials' attacks. G then called Pangilinan's response crude, a political stunt, and a desperate attempt to gain attention, and insists on pushing back. Also on his list, Senator Risa Hontiveros. G said China is committed to managing disputes through consultation and dialogue, stressing that they only respond when offended or provoked. Senators Pangilinan and Hontiveros have yet to respond to the new jab, but some of their colleagues are hitting back.
Sila ang nambubuli, sila nag-water cannon sa atin, and yet nakuha pa nilang maging sensitive. Come on. Dapat kung gaano kakapal ang blip, blip, blip.
Desisyon lang ng Senado yun. Kaya kung ano man yung posisyon namin, walang sino man ang pwede magsabi na mali yun. Desisyon yun ng mga senador. Pero ako, personal ako, hindi ako kasama doon sa resolusyon na yun.
Kapatid mobile journalist Marymon Reyes, we are One News.
Meantime, Senator Rodante Marcoleta has set his own conditions when he goes on a debate with former Supreme Court Associate Justice Antonio Carpio. And that's over issues involving the West Philippine Sea. Early this week, Marcoleta challenged Carpio and other officials to a public discussion before accepting Philippine Coast Guard spokesperson Jay Tariela's invitation. Tariela has offered the senator a domain awareness flight to the Kalayaan Islands in Palawan. In a social media post, Marcoleta said Carpio's proposal for a two-part agenda restricts the scope of the debate. Marcoleta wants no limits, as this will shortchange the people who deserve to see the complete picture of the WPS issue. Early this week, Justice Carpio set these parameters for the discourse.
I accepted the challenge to debate this topic. First, the first topic is there legally a West Philippine Sea? In other words, is it in our law that there is a West Philippine Sea? Because Marcoleta is saying there is no such thing as a West Philippine Sea. The second is if there is a West Philippine Sea in our law, are the maritime zones of our islands in the Kalayaan Island Group part of the West Philippine Sea?
Now let's have someone weigh in on these recent developments, and top of mind, as always, is our resident geopolitical analyst, Richard Heydarian. Great to see you again, Richard.
Salamat, good to see you. Just to be clear, I think it was on my podcast that Justice Carpio said he's willing to take up the first time the debate with Senator Marcoleta. I saw your interview with him, very interesting.
Well, let's leave that debate to discuss later on in the show. But what do you, what's your assessment of the tensions now, the harsh words being exchanged by the senators and Chinese embassy officials? Is it time for the ambassador to go?
To be honest, medyo surprised ako dito with the turn of events. For the sake of transparency, actually, I had the opportunity to have a meeting with the new Chinese ambassador just the other month before I headed back here to Oxford. And the sense I got from that meeting, it was a very comprehensive 1 to 2 hour conversation. It was very constructive. It was very, I would say, I was very honest and very clear about where the Philippines stands and what to expect and what not to expect. To be fair to the new Chinese ambassador, he has a background in Washington, D.C., so he understands how democracies like ours operate. He understands their checks and balances, their separation of powers. He understands the complexity of communication and sensitivity of communication. And he's someone who has made it very clear that stabilization, not a golden age of bilateral relationship, but a stabilization of relationship is something important for him. At the same time, of course, as you can see with Secretary Lazaroff, Department of Foreign Affairs, you can see with President Marcos, also, they are committed to stabilization of bilateral relationship against the backdrop of a lot of uncertainty in the global geopolitical landscape, with Trump potentially engaging in yet another military activity, the rules-based order under pressure. But here we are. We have this world war, and I wonder if this is the advent of hindi na wolf warrior, parang dragon warrior. I didn't have a chance to see the spokesman of the Chinese embassy, but it looks like the spokesman is the new dragon warrior and is really taking up on multiple figures, and probably didn't help that Ronald Llamas and some of our colleagues also joined the fray. But to be honest, because we're the ASEAN chair this year, I hope our senators and everyone keep in mind that we have to look all good also to the rest of ASEAN, meaning, yes, we have to stand by our rights. Yes, we have to push back against any kind of bullying. Yes, no one has a right to tell us what to say and what not to say, especially in our own country. But having said that, this is the year that we want all the major leaders to come to Manila. We want to have some movement on the code of conduct negotiations. We want to get ASEAN on our side. And to be honest, from outside the Philippines, some ASEAN countries are looking at it and saying, here you go again, the Filipinos and everyone trying to score political points by making the Chinese a punching bag. Of course, I don't agree with that characterization, but we have to be sensitive also how the rest of ASEAN will perceive the situation.
Okay, so how can cooler heads intervene? How can we dial down the exchange?
Well, it takes two, or in this case, maybe three to tango. At least on the part of the Malacanang, they made it clear they don't want to be part of any world war. And I think it's quite important. You had the First Lady, Liza Araneta, being with the ambassador the other week, signaling that the first family, the administration is committed to stabilization, not a golden era, a stabilization of bilateral relationships just to make sure things don't get out of control. But I think both the spokesman of the Chinese embassy has to roll back this whole dragon warrior. I don't know if someone is trying to establish their street credentials now. They have to draw that back. And also for the senators and our good friends who have clearly, there's a principle behind what they're saying. They're right. I agree with what they're saying. But they have to take into consideration we're ASEAN chair this year. And the priority for our president is to make sure all world leaders will come, including President Xi Jinping, so that we can have some substantive discussion and move the conversation forward in the coming months as we
So,
host.
Richard, was your reading of the Chinese ambassador wrong? You said he was, more sober, but it doesn't seem that way based on what's going on.
I don't know how internally things operate. He's new, right? So I don't know if the spokesman is directly getting the talking points from the ambassador. I'm also not sure if this is like testing the waters, like how far can we go with this? And I won't be also surprised. We have a situation whereby, the head of state of Venezuela was just abducted the other month. The president of the United States is threatening Greenland and potentially threatening another military operation against another country in the Middle East. Probably there's some entrepreneurial diplomats out there, not necessarily ambassador, who feel that this is a time for China also to speak out and speak loudly. It's quite interesting that in neighboring Taiwan, we're also seeing a similar phenomenon, but in a sense that we didn't talk about the other side of the equation. The elements in the Philippines who are actually friendly to China. So one thing that I believe made this situation very revealing and very contentious is that you had a lot of senators who are known to be close to President Duterte and who are known to have very China-friendly point of view, to be honest. And I think that made the situation much more complicated. So maybe someone, maybe in China, thought, let's roll the dice and see who is going to be arguing in our behalf or who's going to be much more sympathetic to our position. Maybe someone wanted to muddy the water. So I think it's important for responsible senators and statesmen to make sure, not forget that we're ASEAN chair this year, and also not give a platform to certain points of view that may make China feel that, oh, we have allies anyways in the Philippine Senate and probably we can push our narrative. So I think that's why we have to be aware of the bigger picture here, because it's sad to see that some of our senators seem to be more interested in arguing against our case rather than questioning the loopholes in China's claims. Like, okay, we can debate about whether West Philippines is in Google Maps or not, but is the 9-dash line of China in the Google control? So I think it's actually quite worrying for me to see some of the senators coming out and more concerned about what we say against China than about
With our senators, they are outside the diplomatic space. We saw what happened. Amy Marcos, who is seen largely as friendlier to China, has lost her position also as chairperson of the Foreign Affairs Committee in the Senate. But we also heard like some senators actually cursing. do you think this is a good cop, bad cop situation? Or do you think we're actually losing some sort of pride here because we're, long story short, pumapatol tayo, diba? Sa mga
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
provocations.
you know it. Pumapatol naman ako when the time is right, right? But I think this is not the right time. I think this time we have to have cooler heads. We have to bring this down because nagiging Zarzuela ito. Remember, I always said that was my concern with the corruption scandal investigation. Gagawin Zarzuela yan, ipopoliticize yan, magiging partisan yan, papogi points yung iba dyan. And unfortunately, we're seeing and yet another very important issue like the West Philippine Sea issue, a very sensitive issue that we already settled in terms of national debate. 90% of Filipinos know what's our claims there. International law is very clear about our claims there. For me, medyo Pandora's box yan eh. Baka babalikan na. Like, I'm very worried. Like, are we really gonna have a debate about, oh, why are we standing up for West? Like, that's not a debate. It's a rabbit hole. To be honest, it's a rabbit hole. We don't look good. We look like we're bullying the new Chinese ambassador to some of the ASEAN countries. Of course, we're not doing that, but that could be misinterpreted that way. But we also look like a very divided country when some senators are more interested in debating the talking points of China or seemingly debating the talking points and standing by us. I would be happy if in China they'll have a similar debate. Why not have a version of, I don't know, Marcoleta and Carpio have this debate in the National People's Congress in China? Guess what? They don't have that. So it's weird and it doesn't look good for us. Forget about looking good for some of the senators out there.
What do you think about what precipitated this was, of course, the cartoon images of Chinese President Xi Jinping that was used in a lecture in a college by a Coast Guard West Philippine Sea spokesperson, Jay Tariela. Do you think he should apologize? Or because he's standing firm that I don't need to say sorry for this?
Oh, absolutely. This is our country. You are a guest in our country. You respect our freedom of expression. You can criticize it. You're free also to criticize it, but not to demand us to apologize for it. Let's just be clear with Commodore Tariela. He's obviously nasa blacklist yan ng China because he has been at the forefront of the public diplomacy transparency initiative against China. So I think a lot of people in China are very angry with him. A lot of people who are sympathetic to China are not very happy with Commodore Tariela. And Commodore Tariela, of course, is a phenomenon. I mean, how many times you had a Philippine government official so active and so effective in terms of public diplomacy and social media? So unfortunately, it comes with a territory that when you have that kind of visibility and vocalness, you're going to be under the laser focused eyes of the other side of the equation. But absolutely, he has no reason to apologize for anything. But having said that, as I said, we have to take the moral high ground here. And by taking up the moral high ground means we have to not forget that we have to win the rest of ASEAN to our side. We have to look like the responsible country, and we have to look like a serious, self-respecting democracy. And unfortunately, that's not what we're seeing here. We're seeing Zarzuela, we're seeing Pogi points and people trying to suddenly be patriotic or people trying to actually... I mean, I was very worried when another senator was, I don't know, looks like making up stories against our good friend Ronald Llamas about his... Like, you don't want to relitigate this case. Well, I don't want to go down that road because I think it's a rabbit hole. So as you notice, I've been uncharacteristically very cautious on this issue because I want us not to forget that bigger picture.
Well, Richard, this Marcos administration has put a big emphasis on transparency initiatives, especially when it comes to maritime issues. But you also have the DFA saying that quiet diplomacy must be pursued. Is there a way for us to strike a balance between quiet diplomacy and transparency?
Okay, so dito I'm very sympathetic to all sides. I completely agree with Secretary Lazaro, who, by the way, was at the forefront of negotiating yung de-escalation. Remember, just the other year, naputulan ng daliri ng isang Philippine Navy sundalo natin, isang bayani natin. Things were getting out of control. And it was back then, as the Undersecretary for DFA, in charge of bilateral negotiations and dialogue with China, she was the one who oversaw some sort of mechanism for us to de-escalate. So Secretary Lazaro has a proven track record of effectively de-escalating it. At the same time, naintindihan ko rin yung other side of this equation, people in the Coast Guard, people in other agencies of the government who basically were not allowed to do their job during Duterte time. So parang nangyari dito is because under Duterte, President Duterte, for 6 years, a lot of very patriotic and passionate people, including, I would say, Commodore Tariela, were not able to fully, fulfill their duties because of the executive, interventions. And back then, even the Foreign Affairs Secretary, Cayetano, right, would sing to a different tune. Now that I think they feel there's a chance for them to express what is right and what they correctly believe is right. I think what we're seeing here is that both the pro-engagement camp and at the same time the let's make the red lines clear camp are out in the open. And I think this is where it's important for the president to sit down with all of these people. We need an interagency coordination on what kind of message we want to send. Because to some people, they're wondering if we are also doing good cop, bad cop to China and other countries. But my sense is it's not good cop, bad cop. It's just two very sincere camps having two very different conceptions of how we should deal with challenge. One says quiet diplomacy, that's DFA clearly, but the other side is saying, no, we have to push our position because we have to make our red lines clear to China because we feel it's not clear enough to them.
Circling back to the Kalayaan Island Group and the potential debate between Justice Carpio and Senator Marcoleta, Richard, I just wanted to get your thoughts because we had Justice Carpio here just a few days ago, and he was saying, we should have gone to the ICJ for a territorial dispute. This is, of course, about KIG. Kalayaan Island Group. Do you think this is a good time? Because we were wondering why nobody had actually done it yet or started it. Apart from the fact it's mahal.
For ICJ, you need both sides to agree. And in fact, the Philippines, you can go to the ICJ website. During the Estrada administration, we also made exemptions to ICJ jurisdiction on the question of anything that has to do with our sovereignty claims. In theory, yes, we have to be open to additional or successive legal cases against China, building on our initial case in 2016, whereby the arbitral tribunal in The Hague made it clear that there was a violation of our sovereign rights, there was ecological damage, etc. But I think that's more like a nuclear option. That should be like one of our tools in the toolkit. But at this point in time, to be honest, I know it sounds strange coming from me, I am for stabilization. This year, we're the ASEAN chair. This is a unique opportunity for us to get the rest of ASEAN to, at the very least, understand our point of view. Because to be honest, when I go across ASEAN, what I tend to hear is, oh, you Filipinos, you're the deputy sheriff of US in the region. That is the Chinese narrative. They try to portray us as fake Asians, as America's proxy in ASEAN. So this is our year to get them to our side, or at least get them to see our side.
Okay,
And this messy domestic politics is not helping, to be honest.
So, Richard, what should the National Security Council be convened, or should the president just call for a LEDAC to kind of tell the senators, hey guys, meron tayong summit ngayon? Should the executive
Absolutely.
take, a step into this word war?
Absolutely. I mean, the last time we had a very capable president who, by the way, is behind LEDAC is President Ramos, right? It was during President Ramos we had the mischief reef crisis, a very serious crisis. I think we can take a page from President Ramos, who moved on multiple fronts. He reached out to ASEAN. In fact, the Code of Conduct negotiation discussion started way before. It was during Ramos' time. He bilaterally reached out to China, even had karaoke with the Chinese premier back then. And then at the same time, he also reached out to our allies in the US and eventually had a visiting forces agreement. And also, there was a legislative executive coordination. I think this is where it's important that the president is the president. Doesn't just say, oh, we in the executive are this, bahala kayo dyan sa Senate. No. Ang impakanan na ating bansa ay nakasalalay dito. ASEAN chair tayo this year. Ang ating mga senador ay national leaders. So what they say matters internationally. Pinapakinggan sila. I know their intentions is very good, especially those who are taking tough stance, Senator Kiko, among others. Pero sana wag natin kalimutan na meron tayong national interest dito na hindi tayo papasok dun sa rabbit hole ng gusto ng ibang tao, which is to make us look as if we're the one bullying China, or make it as if we are the one, trying to provoke the situation. In fact, that's not the case. We are the victims in the West Philippine Sea, and let us make that clear to the rest of the region.
Well, despite the heated verbal exchanges and the escalating word war, Richard, some analysts believe that this won't have any effect when it comes to our bilateral economic relations with China. Is that something you agree with?
Yeah, there's a kind of an autopilot mode to our bilateral relationship with China in terms of trade. And unfortunately, it's not actually a very symmetrical one. We keep on importing from China. I remember 20 years ago, we had trade surplus with China. Now we have huge trade imbalance with them. We keep on importing them. So the importers, in the Philippines are just going to continue to do that. What we need to do with China is that, first of all, stabilize the situation in the West Philippine Sea and make our red lines clear. Make sure there's no reclamation in the Scarborough Shoal, there's no military facilities built on Sabina Shoal and Kalayaan Group of Islands or near that area. But at the same time, also explore ways whereby we can look at long-term cooperation. I mean, China is now the gold standard for industrial policy. For electric cars, BYD just took over Ford as the biggest car sales company in the world. They're already #1 EV exporter in the world. China has so much to offer to the rest of the region. Thailand, Vietnam, Malaysia, they're all benefiting from more high-quality Chinese investments. These are the things that we should discuss with China. But we are not going to be even in a position to discuss this if puro tayong zarzuela, right? We have to bring down the tensions, have a mature discussion, make our red lines clear, and then from there talk to China.
To your point, Richard, about, we always talk about this. China always has very consistent messaging. They've stuck to it for decades. Meanwhile, us, it always changes because it's the nature of our democracy, right? But you mentioned that, of course, Malacanang has said its position. The DFA, which is under the executive, has also said its position via a statement, which I'm sure you've read. Not only that, they assigned a new spokesperson for the Maritime Affairs Department, and we've heard him speak for the first time finally. What are your thoughts on these measures from the executive? Is it going to be enough to put like a quote-unquote good cop in?
Well, I think maybe both sides have to reconsider their spokesmen in this case, because where I will disagree is that, yes, China has a long-term strategy, statecraft, etc. But also you have this wolf warrior, dragon warrior diplomacy, whereby it looks like some junior folks there want to get their promotion, want to establish their street credentials right away and kind of get ahead of themselves, right? This is a new phenomenon we see in China. So I see that also as immaturity, to be honest. So wag natin patulan. If we see immaturity on their part, wag na natin patulan. We can off the record tell them back off, right? There are ways to deal with this kind of, I would say, immature diplomacy. On the part of the Philippines, as correctly pointed out a while ago, there has to be a legislative executive mechanism to talk to the senators to nicely say, hey, wag natin ipaya yung bansa natin. Let's be mature about this. There's a bigger picture here. There's an ASEAN chairmanship here. And at the same time, let's be honest, it looks like within the government, there are different points of view. So there has to be a kind of a clearinghouse kung saan isa lang yung spokesman at yung isang spokesman na yan, siya talaga magsalita. Hindi yung 10 yung spokesman or may isang #1 spokesman and then 4 deputy spokesman or parallel spokesman. Medyo messy in communications natin, to be honest.
Okay. Now that, let's go to the debate now quickly before we let you go, Richard. Since Senator Marcoleta has imposed some conditions that don't look to be acceptable to Justice Carpio, baka hindi matuloy. Salamat na lang at hindi, di ba?
Yeah, well, honestly, I mean, it's nice to juice this out once in a while. I mean, even, you know me, but at some point you just have to stop it. Obviously, Senator Marcoleta is not interested in the legal nuances of this issue. Clearly, he didn't even understand some of the relevant provisions of the ON clause. Like EEZ has nothing to do with territorial claims. That's why there are countries who have claims over islands. I don't know. I mean, like Falkland Islands, how far it is from UK, right? It's it just tells you this guy is not an on-clause expert. So honestly, and if he wants to make it about the big picture, he's not also known as a geopolitical expert. At hindi ko rin siya papatulan on geopolitics, right? So I think, this is a free country, right? Everyone say their side. And so far, I'm confident in the Filipino people. More than 90% of Filipinos in all surveys show that they are on the right side of history and they understand where Justice Carpio and all of these good-hearted senators are coming from. But let's also give diplomacy and stabilization some chance. Yun lang ang aking hingi ngayon.
I can't believe I'm agreeing with you for the first time.
I can't believe that I'm the voice of reason and maturity too, but I think it's the Oxford gentleman in me coming out finally.
Personification of a cool head.
Well, we thank you for speaking to us again. Geopolitical analyst Richard Heydarian.
All right, moving on now to other news. Former Senator Bong Revilla has filed a counter-affidavit for his plunder complaint before the Justice Department. This is among the charges Revilla is facing over a 92.8 million peso ghost flood control project in Bulacan. As alleged by his co-accused, former Public Works Undersecretary Roberto Bernardo, Revilla is among the politicians who received kickbacks from that contract. Bernardo claimed that he even personally delivered 125 million pesos to the residence of the former senator in Cavite. Revilla's lawyers are questioning the validity of the plunder charges, especially after some of his co-accused were accepted as state witnesses. At his appearance before the DOJ today, Revilla had this to say to those who implicated him in the crime.
Sa mga supporters niyo, sir? Paano nakakatulog yung mga nag-akusa sa akin?
We're just going to take a quick break, but coming up, critics are again rebuking Senator Robin Hood Padilla for a remark about young people going through depression and a post about fire victims. That and more stories are still ahead. Keep it here on One News.
Welcome back to The Big Story. Senator Robin Padilla is drawing flack for calling the youth of this generation weak. He made the statement during yesterday's Senate committee hearing on public information and mass media. The hearing tackled a bill that seeks to limit use of social media among minors.
Nako, maraming batang magagalit siguro, pero pasensya na kayo. You are weak. Hindi kayo katulad nung panahon namin na hindi kami iyakin. Nung panahon namin, hindi uso yung salitang depression.
Well, this remark did not sit well with the youth sector's representative in the lower chamber. Kabataan Party List Representative Rene Co said depression among the youth is not surprising, considering the existing crisis in education and corruption. Co also questioned why Padilla would blame the youth for the problem caused by the government itself. Senator Padilla later on clarified his statement, which he said was based on data collated by his office. He said this was not a personal opinion. Padilla then urged critics to act on the data and to not focus on his statement.
Now, aside from this, Padilla also received criticism for this post he made on Facebook. It showed wads of cash supposed to be the senator's personal donation to victims of last week's massive fire in Bongao, Tawi-Tawi. Padilla said he intentionally posted this to raise awareness for the victims.
Binabasta din sa pinost mo daw na...
Paano yung mga pinabalita nyo?
Hindi, yung pinost nyo daw po na yung pera, bakit kailangan pa daw i-post, pinamigay na, yung...
Para gayahin mo. Baka may pera ka, di pa bigay mo, padala mo doon. Anong problema?
Padilla was also asked today about the minority bloc stand on the Senate Blue Ribbon Committee's report on the flood control scandal.
Siyempre, kailangan solid kami sa minority, di ba? Kung ano yung desisyon ng aming minority floor leader, susunod kami.
Walang titima sa minority.
Well, meron naman kaming sa amin, may gusto mong pumirma, di pumirma ka. Pero ako, susunod ako kay Alan.
In other news, the Philippines has been called the global center for the production of online child sex abuse materials. The crisis has taken a sophisticated and terrifying turn. It is no longer just about stranger danger in chat rooms, but about artificial intelligence. As we approach Safer Internet Day on February 24, the call is shifting from mere awareness to absolute accountability. And joining us tonight is Pebbles Sanchez-Ogang, Executive Director of Plan International Pilipinas. Good evening and welcome to The Big Story.
Good evening, ladies, and thank you very much for this opportunity.
All right, tell us why the situation is more urgent today than in previous years.
So what we're seeing right now are Filipinos spending many hours online. On an average, we spend about 9 hours daily, but children are around 5 hours every day in the internet. And what we're also seeing is that technology and other emerging tools, such as artificial intelligence, are actually evolving fast, even faster than how we develop policies, safeguarding measures, and even interventions. And this means that it poses higher risks, especially for girls and children, because now we have more sophisticated tools that are now more capable of causing harm and online sexual abuse and exploitation. And at the same time, more platforms, both mainstream or those popular ones, and those alarmingly non-mainstream or unpopular ones are being used by perpetrators, making monitoring and reporting very difficult and challenging for authorities.
How is AI being employed to exploit the minors?
Yes, what we're seeing right now is that we have lots of artificial intelligence image manipulating tools that could actually create deep fakes, because now it's very easy to overlay a photo to another photo and even to a video. We're also being alarmed by various nudifying apps that can easily be downloaded in various sites. And our children and young people, just like what I've mentioned earlier, are being reported to actually become very active in non-popular social media and communication platforms that are also driven by artificial intelligence tools. But
How
what
are
we're
they lured? How are they drawn to these sites? How?
right now, as what we've been observing, if you are on social media, whatever input you put into that, when you search for something, immediately some advertisements would appear in your feed. And so this is one way of various harmful tools and content could actually find their way to our children. What we've also noticed is that because of this easier way of these platforms to access our children, and in the other way around, our children accessing these platforms, we're now seeing more self-facilitated production of child sexual abuse and exploitation materials, and even self-facilitated live streaming of exploitation materials from young people.
Pebbles, can we laymanize that? And I do take it to mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, you mean there's an AI platform and that encourages, or using AI, someone on the internet can lure a child to make a live stream of some very risky behavior or medyo, inappropriate sexual materials?
Yeah.
Yes, we call it transactional exploitation. So a perpetrator could actually attract a child because of economic value. I'll give you money. So in exchange of that, you show me obscene materials. Or I'll give you emotional validation, the love and affection that you don't get from people around you that you value. Or sometimes it's really just the notion of being curious, because a lot of people right now, if they don't get the right information from the proper people and authorities, they would start to explore online. But there's also another angle to this, because since information right now is widely available in the internet, young people themselves actually are starting to create their own sexual abuse and exploitation
When you
materials.
say young, what age are we talking about here? What's
Oh,
the
yes.
age range?
Yes, based on the researches that we've done in Plan International Pilipinas, we've seen girls and young people doing this as early as 10 years old. But let me be very explicit in saying that children and young people are not to be blamed, because at the end of the day, this is a reflection of our societal gaps in terms of policies, enforcement of our laws, and at the same time, the lack of protection in our systems and platforms today.
So what you're saying is, from before, adults were the ones who would encourage these children or put these children at risk, right? But now it can happen that a child himself, unknowingly or naloko, nalure ng pera, will do it on their own without the facilitation of a third party.
Yes, sadly, this is what is happening right now. And with technological advances, it poses more risks. But at the same time, you still have your harmful social norms that actually perpetrate these kinds of harmful activities for our children. So you still have victim blaming, you still have normalization of silence if you're a victim, or and even there's still stigma, no? So these conversations cannot really be put into the table of families and even communities, which makes this issue very complex and challenging.
Pebbles? Go ahead. Go ahead.
I guess this also exposes a huge gap, right, in how platforms verify the ages, the profiles of users, as well as the restrictive measures. Because aren't social media platforms supposed to have these authorization measures to check your age, kung anong ipapalabas, dapat appropriate din siya kung dun sa profile mo?
Yes, you're completely right with that. But there's still that constant challenge of improving our safeguarding measures online. Plan International Pilipinas is working with the private sector to ensure that we have safety by design measures in place. Ang ibig pong sabihin nito, kung may terms and conditions, are they child-friendly enough? Are they simple so that children and even their parents could understand it better? Do we have age-appropriate rating systems that is also easily understandable, and our regulations and monitoring systems are actually very strict to ensure that no harmful content could actually reach our children.
I was about to say many countries, well, a few countries have already banned young girls and boys from having social media accounts. Do you think this is effective, or do these children engage in this behavior even without social media accounts? Or is having a social media account already like a magnet?
What we know for sure is that our children are already online. So they're digital natives, and this has been part of their daily lives already. They use it for education, for entertainment, for learning. And while we see that technology being online could be a force for good, we are also seeing higher risks because of this. Our stand as Plan International Pilipinas is that we should actually promote digital literacy and digital safety, not just among children and young people, but with parents, families, and communities, so that everybody understands how we can optimize the advantages of social media and technology, but at the same time prevent it from harming our children.
So I'm guessing a Safer Internet Day, which is on February 24, this will be kind of teaching children and minors how to self-police, how to be more aware, and how to basically, mind their tracks as they navigate the online world.
Or their guardians, because, you're abdicating, I guess, your duty to watch over the child to the internet. I mean,
Yes.
bahala ka dyan. And they're there for hours on end. You're not aware that they're already being exploited online.
Yes, it's a call to action for us parents to be mindful of where our children's activity online. We need to know what they're reading, what they're checking, what they're posting. We need to be more aware of the applications and the advantages and disadvantages. But this coming February 24, the discussion on the risks and opportunities of technology and artificial intelligence and being online will actually be led by our girl and youth leaders. We are gathering 250 of them from all over the Philippines. And then during that discussion, they will be developing a strong call to action, and they will demand not just from the government, not just from the civil society, but also from the private sector to ensure that we create a space, an online space that is safer for them.
And is there also a way to go after these sexual predators so they can no longer prey over these young victims?
Yes, the government actually is, in terms of our progress in developing the systems and processes to go after these perpetrators, the government has invested much already, but we know that there's still a long way to go because I've mentioned earlier, there's still normalization of silence, there's still stigma. Marami po kaming reports na nare-receive sa Plan International Pilipinas na pinipili na lamang ng mga pamilya na hindi na ito i-report sa kinaukulan dahil nahihiya sa kapitbahay, nahihiya sa komunidad. Minsan naman sila na lang yung umaalis para lang maiwasan yung issue. So these harmful social norms have to be addressed. But at the same time, as civil society, we're coming in with a stronger call to action so that the government could invest more in preventing OSAIC and the production of exploitation and abusive materials online.
Pebbles, are you working with the government? I know it's in the LEDAC. The president has made a call for stricter regulation and enforcement with regards to, the child sexual abuse and exploitation. There was a technical working group already formed in Congress. Are you guys consulting with them?
We're very active with discussions on online safety. In fact, other than policy development, we're also capacitating local government units and communities so that they can strengthen their institutions to address online sexual abuse and exploitation. We are strengthening referral systems in communities and at the same time increasing awareness of children and young people and their parents and their communities.
Pebbles, how did the Philippines become the top producer of this online sex abuse materials? Are we ranked number 1 in the world?
That is a very difficult question, but what I know for sure is that we are highly at risk to online sexual abuse and exploitation. And primarily because, just like what I've mentioned earlier, our children are already online and that there are still gaps in terms of our policies, the policies enforcement, and at the same time, our systems and platforms are still they still need to ensure that safeguarding measures are in place.
Yeah, but how do we measure this? How do you know that we are at risk, that this is really we are at a danger point?
The government is measuring it through reports and at the same time statistics. However, based on our experience, just like what I shared, the data doesn't really say and tell how many children and girls and young people are actually affected by online sexual abuse and exploitation because of the stigma, because of the choice of the family to just be silent. And there's these harmful social norms, kung tawagin nga po natin, that are still prevailing in our society today. So actually, there are more cases than we actually know of and are actually recorded in the government.
All right, we thank you for joining us here on The Big Story and sounding the alarm. Pebbles Sanchez-Ogang, Executive Director of Plan International Filipinas.
We're pausing for another breather, but right after that, a third arrest warrant is out for gambling tycoon Atong Ang, while the bounty for information on him has been doubled. The Big Story will be right back. Keep it here.
The Big Story is back with the DILG doubling the reward money for information on gambling tycoon Charlie Atong Ang. Despite the bounty of 20 million pesos now, Ang remains elusive since he was first ordered arrested on January 13. Now, Ang has 3 arrest warrants for the missing Sabongeros case. The latest one was issued this week by a regional trial court in San Pablo, Laguna. The DILG now considers the businessman the #1 most wanted person in the country.
We are increasing the bounty for Atong Ang to 20 million pesos for information leading to his arrest. Seryoso kami rito Kung tinatanong ko sa nanggagaling yan sa mga confidential funds provided to the PNP at saka sa DILG para sa mga ganitong klaseng kaso. Tingin nyo yun. Walang walang GPP atos dito Totoong tao babayaran namin dito kung makita namin.
The PNP and the NBI believe Ang is still in the Philippines. Cambodia has recently denied the gaming tycoon is hiding in the country. State witness Julie Dondon Patidongan claimed Ang has resources abroad, being allegedly part of an international syndicate. This Thursday, operatives from the NBI organized Organized and Transnational Crimes Division went to the mansions of Ang's 2 children inside an exclusive subdivision in Makati. The tycoon was not there and so were his children.
The accused may be communicating with the family, with the children. Logical kasi that the immediate family will not be giving information as to the whereabouts of a family member na nagtatago from the law, despite of the fact that there is a warrant.
And here are the other headlines this Thursday, beginning with possible criminal charges against a shipping line which ship recently sank. Public Services Committee Chair Senator Raffy Tulfo is urging the Transportation Department to sue Allison Shipping Lines for murder. 51 people died after the MV Trisha Kirsten 3 sank in Basilan on January 26. Senator Tulfo said this is not the first time Allison's vessel was involved in a maritime accident.
I will file a criminal case against Allison. The owners, especially. Kasi mga may-ari may kapabayan dito. Yes, alam nila na bulok yung barko nila and yet pinalarga pa rin nila. Pinapalaot pa rin nila. Alam nila na dapat mag-retire na yung barko nila dahil 31 years old na. And yet, pinalaot pa rin nila.
Sabi ko, pag-aralan nyo na baka pwedeng murder just because, sa aking opinion, alam naman nila na yung kanilang barko ay bulok at kanilang barko ay hindi seaworthy.
And in other news, former presidents Joseph Estrada and Gloria Macapagal Arroyo have paid their last respects to the late Speaker Jose De Venecia Jr. Arroyo was De Venecia's running mate in the 1998 elections, which Estrada won by a landslide. Also in the wake of JDV and Taguig were his successors as Speaker Feliciano Belmonte Jr., Martin Romualdez, and the incumbent House Leader Boji D. De Venecia's remains will be brought to his hometown of Dagupan City on Saturday. On Monday, necrological services will be held for him at the Batasang Pambansa. De Venecia will be laid to rest on Wednesday at the Libingan ng mga Bayani.
In another development, the Foreign Affairs Department warns Filipinos against jobs that could lead to recruitment into foreign armed forces. The DFA stresses that participation in foreign conflicts, including the Russia-Ukraine war, can put Filipinos in grave danger and in violation of Philippine laws. Such could also cost them their citizenship. The warning comes on the back of reports of 2 Filipinos who allegedly fought for Russia. One was killed while the other was captured as a prisoner of war. And the International Criminal Court Pretrial Chamber 1 has allowed both the prosecution and defense to present new evidence in the case against former President Rodrigo Duterte. This ruling clears the way for Duterte's defense to add 78 items, while the prosecution may include 2 more. The chamber ordered both parties to submit their final lists of evidence by February 13, 2026. Duterte's confirmation of charges hearing begins on February 23.
And on a lighter note now, here is a message from an environmental group 2 days before Valentine's, and that's love should not be toxic. Our big picture tonight is a warning from Ban Toxics not to buy Valentine gift items tainted with lead. In a recent study, the group found plastic flowers, heart-shaped items, and ceramic mugs containing lead. Instead, Ban Toxics has suggestions on how to celebrate Heart's Day in a meaningful and sustainable way. How about simple, natural, or DIY gifts? Activities such as concerts, art exhibits, or nature hikes, or writing a letter or a poem, a candlelit dinner at home, and couples planting a tree together. Again, Ban Toxic says give experiences instead of things and avoid plastic-based presents that come in excessive packaging.
I second the motion.
Wag na plastic flowers. Diba?
Yeah.
So much plastic in life.
Right.
But you know, red, yellow, and orange paint and white, usually mataas yung lead content. The dangers
Meron
of...
din namang natural dye.
Yan. Diyan papasok si Ces, sa natural.
Like hibiscus is red.
Gumamela
Yeah.
in a local parlance.
Yeah. Or what is it called? Roselle. The
Roselle tea.
Yeah.
Okay, so those are some ideas that you can give your loved ones this Valentine's Day. That's 2 days away from now. But for tonight, that's it for the big story this Thursday. Thank you so much for watching.
We're back here tomorrow at 8 p.m. and we'll see you then.
Kapatid, we are One News, all sides, all the time. Have a good night.